Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of In Pit Lane, coming to you live from the lockdown beyond the suburban curtain here in a lockdown city, Melbourne. Well, if you look around the world of international motorsport and you try and pick one country that seems to consistently punch way above its weight, it has to be New Zealand. I mean, going back to the 1960s, people like Bruce McLaren, Denny Hulme, Chris Amon, throughout the 70s, Graham McRae, Graham Lawrence, into the current era with people like Nick Cassidy, Earl Bamber, Brendan Hartley, and of course the local drivers here in the Australian Supercar Championship like Scott McLaughlin and Shane Van Gisbergen, who are just dominating the scene. What's the reason? I mean, how do they do so well for such a small population? Well, one of the recent things that is acting in their favour is something called the Toyota Racing Series. Now, if you don't know about this, its alumni is a who's who of international motorsport, including 3 current Formula One drivers. And joining us on tonight's program, we're going to be talking about the Toyota Racing Series and New Zealand motorsport in general with our guest Nicolas Cailol. Now, of course, motorsport is still happening around the world. There's nothing happening here in Melbourne, but there is stuff, believe it or not, happening around the world. So let's find out exactly what is going on with the In Pit Lane Motorsport News. A combination of great driving and daring strategy conspired to rob Mercedes of another Grand Prix win, this time the one-off 70th anniversary Grand Prix at Silverstone. A brave decision to qualify and start the race on a hard compound tyre paid off for Red Bull Racing and Max Verstappen. Verstappen took the lead from Lewis Hamilton after the Mercedes were forced to pit early on their medium compound rubber, handing the lead to the Dutchman. He drove a brilliant race, managing to both conserve his tyres and set consistent lap times that kept him in front till the checkered flag. Hamilton passed teammate Bottas to take second late in the race after a late pit stop for more tyres. It was another good drive from Charles Leclerc, who also managed to make the tyres last for a one-stop race to finish 4th, as Ferrari looks increasingly like a one-car team, with Sebastian Vettel losing his smile and moping around the mid-pack like a spoiled teenager. It was a race to forget for Dan Ricciardo. 3 pit stops and a mid-race spin saw the Australian driver end the race a lap down in 14th place. The famous Belgian town of Spa has been a busy place for the past few weeks. A week ago it was the DTM. This weekend it'll be the World Endurance Championship. But last weekend, the European Le Mans Series. It was a thrilling race with Spa's changeable weather causing chaos right down to the very end. The team of Felipe Albuquerque and Phil Hansen took the win, giving the team their second win from 2 races and recording their 3rd ELMS win at Spa in the past 3 years. Melbourne driver and friend of the show James Allen and co-drivers Thomas Laurent and Alex Cognow came through to take 2nd place. The Kessel Racing Ferrari of Michael Broniszewski, Marcus Gomes and David Perel took their first victory of the 2020 European Le Mans Series, moving into the championship lead as a result. LMP3 was won by the United Autosports Ligier team of Rob Weldon, Tom Gamble and Wayne Boyd. NHRA drag racing returned to Indianapolis last weekend. It was an emotional win in Pro Stock bikers, and Jel Sampi came through for her first win since 2016, going 6.88 at 196.07 miles an hour to beat Chris Bostic in the final.
I bet you thought I was dead, but I'm not dead! No! Happy birthday to me! Yes! Finally!
Another emotional victory, this time in funny car, as veteran Ron Capps won his first ever race at Indy. Capps took a comfortable win after J.R. Todd broke off the starting line.
My wife, man, we've been coming to Indy so many years. She lives this dream through me. I get emotional here, but she understands the mood swings when you don't do well and you go home, and just it's something we love to do. It's the best job in the world. But our family members that have been coming here for years to be here when I won Indy, I'm so bummed they're not here, but this is going back, and it might be a week-long party, I can guarantee you that.
In Pro Stock, it was an all-Coughlin family final as 5-time champion Jeg Coughlin Jr. drove past nephew and first-time Pro Stock finalist Troy Coughlin Jr. in his Jegs.com Chev Camaro. And in Top Fuel, it was defending and back-to-back Top Fuel world champion Steve Torrance, who picked up his second win of the year, beating Terry McMillan in the finals. A big weekend for Kevin Harvick, who won both races in the NASCAR doubleheader at Michigan. In race 1, Harvick won both stages and took the flag in a dominant performance, leading home Brad Keselowski and Martin Truex Jr. Sunday saw the domination continue, with Harvick taking the final lead with 40 laps to go to hold off Denny Hamlin by just 9/10 of a second. Michigan is clearly a happy hunting ground for Harvick, who has now won 4 out of the last 5 races at the track. A first ever win for the new front-engined Honda NSX of Kudai Sakakoshi and Bertrand Baguette in the second round of Super GT at Fuji Speedway. Sakakoshi and Baguette took the lead on lap 36 after Tomoki Najiri in the Arta NSX spun off at turn 12. Second in GT 500 was the Tom's Toyota Supra of Yuhei Sekiguchi and Sasha Fenestraz, the second consecutive runner-up finish, putting the pair into the lead in the GT 500 Championship. Third outright was another Supra of Subi and Noshima. Hiroki Kato and Masataka Yanagita won the GT 300 class in the Dream 28 Lotus Evora, giving that car its first Super GT victory. And a surprise win in MotoGP as Brad Binder rewrote the record books to win the Czech Moto Grand Prix. It was the first outright MotoGP win for the KTM team, as well as Binder's first ever win and the first for a South African rider. There was a very unfamiliar look to the podium, with Franco Morbidelli and Johan Zarco filling the minor places in a trifecta that would have paid more than Marc Marquez's medical bills. We're going to take a break now on In Pit Lane, but when we come back, we're going to be joined by our special guest, Nicolas Cailol, to talk about the Toyota Racing Series and all things motorsport in New Zealand. Don't go away, we'll be right back. Welcome back to In Pit Lane. Well, our guest tonight is Nicolas Cailol, who is the man in charge of the Toyota Racing Series in New Zealand. Over the past decade or so, the series has developed itself a very enviable reputation as a proving ground for young talent. Now, the only Australian winner so far is our friend Thomas Randall. He followed on from a couple of guys you probably never heard of, Lance Stroll and Lando Norris. But this planning for this year's event is now in full swing, despite all of the problems that we have facing us at the moment. And I caught up with Nicolas about a week ago and asked him about the Toyota Racing Series.
2021 will be the 17th season of the series, so it's been created in 2004, 2005, which was initially developed as a New Zealand-only drivers series, and let's say from 2004-5 just to 2011, it was mainly international. It was mainly local drivers, and Daniel Kvyat was the first international driver to come around really in 2011 as, let's say, as a big name as a junior Red Bull. And from that moment, the series developed to more international series. And let's say we're going now on the third generation of car, which initially the first 2 generations of car, the FT40 and FT50, were basically a car unique to New Zealand with no equivalent in the rest of the world. But as the world is changing and the motorsport world is changing, and I say the drivers are looking to spend their money on a more relevant series, we had to turn up to the original F3 chassis, which is a chassis which is used in several championships around the world, like the Formula Renault Euro Cup, the Formula European Championship, the F3 Asia. They all have the same chassis, and then which is Status, our partner for 16 years now. And so it makes it even more relevant. And from 2015, we started to get even more interest from a big program like the Ferrari Drivers Academy and the Red Bull Junior team. And so we got a lot of young drivers coming from this big program who've been sent overseas to come to New Zealand because they know that there's 5 intense weeks of racing, and it's good for the development of those drivers.
You mentioned the name of Daniel Kvyat, but he's far from the only current Formula One driver that has been involved in the series. Tell us a bit about some of the other people, not just the Formula One guys, but other names that we probably know in Australia from who have competed in and been successful in the Toyota Racing Series.
Yeah, just in terms of Formula One, we basically, out of all those TRS years, we have now 16 alumni who have been have a role in F1, and we have currently 3 drivers. Daniel Kvyat for Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri now, and Lance Stroll, who was the 2015 champion driving for Racing Point, and Lando Norris, our 2016 champion, who is driving there in F1. But as you say, as you mentioned, there's a lot of different categories where our drivers alumni are shining. Like the big name in terms of New Zealand is Nick Cassidy, obviously, who's been a double champion in 2012 and 2013, and is now a Super GT champion, Super Formula champion. And we got of us drivers like, as I say, on the Australian side, Thomas Randall, who has been our champion in 2017, is keep going on well in his career. Is shifted now to supercars, Super 2, Super 3 kind of racing. But I say all the big names, Brendan Hartley was our first winner, was the winner of the first race of TRS, and we know how as good has been done. And I say Mitch Evans in Formula E, all kind of different career, but successful career after going to TRS.
Yes, Thomas Randall has been a guest on the show, was a guest a couple of weeks ago, and I know every time we've spoken to Thomas about his experience over there, he's had nothing but praise for the event. Are you surprised under those circumstances that all the Australians who have taken part in it have come back just singing the praises of the category and the championship? Are you surprised that you don't get more sort of Australians going over to take part in the championship?
We got a couple of Australians. Jackson Walls came back last year. So it was his second year, and he was a successful year this year because he won a race in Pukekohe. So the drivers and Tommy Smith as well came around. We got a couple of Callan Williams, who's now doing a F3 in FIA 3 in Europe. So those guys, it's not as many as we would like to have, but it's always good to have some Australian competition with the Kiwis, with reviving the Trent Tasman rivalry. But no, we still have a good amount of interest, even specifically this year, of young Carter guys from Australia and drivers who've done the Formula 4 experience, keen just to try to come over and just to have some race. So yes, we would like to have more, but let's say we still have Australian drivers coming every year, so it's quite positive in a way.
The other thing is the popularity of the championship amongst drivers, particularly from Europe, but also growing in Asia as well, means that there's probably sort of less places for New Zealand drivers. What is the championship doing to encourage more young New Zealand drivers to get involved?
So we have the let's say the help of the Kiwi Driver Fund. We try just to help the Kiwi drivers to go over the line, because as we know, there's motorsports we try to make the cheapest way of the series just to be low on the budget, to be more affordable for the Kiwi drivers. But those Kiwi drivers, I guess, from most of the drivers internationally are struggling just to be able to gather some budget to be able to race in New Zealand, and then after to go overseas. But we're trying to do our best on the Toyota side. Is a great support of the series just to be able to lower the cost at the maximum for all the drivers. And as we say, it's kind of an investment. But when we look, for example, at the last 2 years, the champion has been picked up by Red Bull in his junior team. So it's a great value just to try to convince sponsors and partners just to race against those international drivers. Because if you're doing good, because the series is now internationally well recognized, and having the support of the FIA with the super license points and all those kind of things makes the series under the spotlight of international big recruiters. So it's always a good possibility for them. Just if they do good in the series, there's the potential of being picked up with the program and go further in their career.
Well, you mentioned Lance Stroll earlier. I think that was one of the things. He's winning the championship a few years ago was probably one of the things that took him to the next level in terms of the respect that he had from people outside of his own team. I mean, he was always son of rich father, but having won the TRS, he suddenly went up in everybody's estimation, and people went, hang on a second, rich kid but can drive.
Yeah, exactly, and it is the thing. Like all the people who have some success here in TRS have exactly the same success overseas. So it's not like the TRS is a different, let's say, behavior with those kids. If you're talented and you're doing good in TRS, but you will do good as well in other series when you go back. So all the front runners in TRS have been front runners in the categories. And when you look, for example, on the past weekends, we get 6 winners in the different categories. It's Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula 4 in the US, and Pro Indy and European, and Formula Renault and Formula Regional Championship. And all those guys who have been winners there, they have been winners here as well. So it's at the end, because of its unique format, is drag all the best driver from all kind of different environment and history in racing. They all grab together, but basically we can claim we gather the best of the best.
Well, we're going to take a break now on In Pit Lane, but we'll come back in just a moment, and when we do, we'll find out more about the Toyota Racing Series and also the scene in New Zealand in general. But you're watching In Pit Lane, Channel 31 Melbourne, Channel 44 Adelaide, and of course the In Pit Lane YouTube channel. We'll be back with more right after this break. Welcome back to In Pit Lane. Well, this week we're talking about the Toyota Racing Series over in New Zealand. And Nicholas, it's really strange. I mean, Australia and New Zealand, so close together, but geographically and culturally, and going back in our history, our shared history with the Anzac spirit and all that sort of thing. The surprising thing I've always thought is that here in Australia, we don't really know too much about the state of New Zealand motorsport and exactly what's happening over there. From what I've seen and the little experience I've had over there, it looks to be a fairly healthy scene. I mean, right now, what is the state of motorsport in New Zealand?
I have to say it's quite good at the moment. Let's say we have two young, let's say, feeder categories like the Formula First and Formula Ford. And I was last weekend at Mansfield where they had the winter series. And even though it was a winter series, there was 10 drivers in Formula First and 10 drivers in Formula Ford. So this kind of learning classes is good as a feeder for TRS and developing those drivers for going further. So I say on the single-seater side is pretty good. And on the GT side with the Toyota TR86 Championship, we're kind of having a good base for those drivers just to develop from a young age. With basically out of the karting, they have the choice of if they want to go towards TRS and single seaters, they can do from Formula First and Formula Ford. And if they want to go from GT, then from out of the karting, they can jump in a Toyota TR86 and do that series and develop for further. So I think that the health in general of the motorsport scene in New Zealand is quite promising.
The thing that always gets me in my dealings with people in New Zealand motorsport is very much the can-do sort of attitude over there. And I look at things, I was lucky enough to go over for the opening of Hampton Downs quite a few years ago now. And the difference that we found straight away was that, the difference between Australia and New Zealand. And over there, they saw the need for another circuit on the North Island in that area. They said, well, long-term, Pukekohe is probably not going to last. We need a new circuit, let's build one. Whereas here in Australia, everyone's always got the hand out, the government should do this, the government should do that. And you've got some fabulous circuits over there now. I mean, I mentioned Hampton Downs, but also Highlands Park. And tell us a bit about the tracks that the series will race in, and also in light of the current situation, what the situation is in regard to racing on the South Island.
So yeah, we're quite lucky to have a person like Tony Quinn, who has invested a lot of money on the motorsport scene in New Zealand. And I say he's the owner of Hampton Downs and Highlands Park, which has the two latest circuits in New Zealand, and we call it a high level, let's say, class as part of categories. While the other circuits are pretty good, like the Turbo was used with the A1GP, so it's quite a nice track. And I say it's New Zealand is a small country, but they have basically 9 big race tracks where we usually go there with TRS, and it's, let's say, it's always a tricky situation on every time we're preparing a calendar, because it's so nice quality circuits, North Island, South Island, and it's hard to pick the 5 ones for the season. So it's a luxury that we have on our hands. And for the upcoming seasons, we're still having discussion with the promoter Speedworks and Motorsport New Zealand to know exactly which circuits we're going to go over. And I think a part of it is of the choice is due as well to the COVID situation and the possible restriction on the border. That if we were to run only a New Zealand driver series, we'll try just as we say, try to be as the most affordable and the cheapest solution we could have, and that solution is potentially maybe just doing the series in the North Island. But we're quite optimistic at the moment in terms of getting the exemption from the Ministry of Business and Immigration to be able to get those international drivers. So we're still looking forward just to go south as well, because yes, he had an extra cost in terms of freight, just to move all those cars and equipment down to South. But the welcoming we have from the South Island circuits is just amazing. So even if for 2021 season we may not be able to go to the north to the South Island, we committed to 2022 when it comes back to normal, just at least go again to the South Island, because as I say, there's such a great circuit in the South Island as well, but we can't skip them.
You had such a strong tradition of open wheel racing over in New Zealand, far more in recent times than here in Australia. Finally, we've got a new category, a new open wheeler category, which is actually exciting people here in Australia at the moment, which is the S5000 category. How do you see that fitting in with the scene over there and with the Toyota Racing Series? Is that any sort of threat, or do you think that you can work, the two of you can work together and perhaps come up with something so that you can have some cooperation?
We have a 5000 scene as well here in New Zealand, so I don't think the 5000 developed in Australia is in competition with TRS, because we're not at the same level of power, and so it's not really on the same level of cars, and it doesn't really go towards the same targeting of drivers. So I don't see it as a threat. It's just another single seater categories, and the more we can have in terms of single seater who's not competing against each other, the better it is for both country. Then we have really a clear path from Formula First, Formula Ford, Toyota, or even the F3 in Australia, the 5000 in Australia. But if that's a complete line, I don't think there's any competition between the two series.
For any young drivers and particularly parents of young drivers who are over here who might be looking at putting together a run in the series, what sort of budget are they looking at? If somebody wanted to get in contact with you and join the series for 2021, what sort of budget would they need to find?
We haven't fully finalized the budget, but it's going to be around between 180 and 200,000 Kiwi. So it's, as I say, when you come back to that, we're planning on it's something around $65 a kilometer of racing, and compared to all the other series, is almost 20% cheaper than any of the series in the world. So the price for the money they're going to pay for the mileage they're going to get, because at the end, what makes the New Zealand unique is 5 condensed week, but is a lot of driving. Like the drivers will come in those 5 weeks will do between 2,000 and 3,000 kilometers in 5 weeks. So it's quite intense. And at the end, when you cut down the value to $2 per kilometer, it's one of the cheapest series in the world.
Well, I know a lot of people will be interested in having a look at it and taking part. And as you say, those super license points make it very, very attractive as well. Thanks for joining us and letting us know more about the TRS series. And hopefully everything is sorted out and we can get back to some sense of normality fairly soon. But for now, Nicolas, thanks for joining us on In Pit Lane to tell us about the Toyota Racing Series.
Thanks for hosting me, and looking forward to see Australian drivers competing in TRS next season.
Well, thank you to Nicolas for all that information and news of what's happening in New Zealand. Obviously, the situation at the moment is still very fluid, but as he said, at the moment, things are looking probably as good in New Zealand as they are anywhere on the face of the planet right now. If you'd like to find out more about that, obviously there is a lot of money involved, but as he said, the money involved is probably per kilometre as cheap as any sort of similar international racing series around the world. They've certainly got the runs on the board. I hope you'll join us next week on the program. We'll have more motorsport news and all sorts of things, which we'll make up as we go along as per usual. So from all of us here, locked in the small panic room outside of Melbourne, from In Pit Lane, thanks for joining us and bye for now.